1941, a Tokyo radio weather report was sent. Higashi no kaze-ame, east wind rain, a signal that a storm was brewing, and that in a few days the lives of the men and women of Pearl Harbor would be changed forever. 3 days later, on December 7, 1941, in this very hangar, you would have been surrounded by a storm of flames and destruction. America experienced a surprise attack by the Empire of Japan, propelling the United States into mankind's bloodiest war and confronting the nation with an initial and devastating defeat. Japanese Navy pilot Zenji Abe from the aircraft carrier Akagi participated in the attack, which would become the first of many battles in the Pacific War.
230マイルぐらいから丘を返してね、に向かっていっちゃうわけですね。僕が考えたのは、フォード島のね、東側に2列になって、その資料館はおるでしょ。だから一番この有効をしてるのは、一派のね、雷撃隊、ドライ攻撃を一番有効はある。
Ford Island was at the center of the attack, within the eye of the storm. As bombs were raining down around him, 18-year-old radio operator Everett Highland was aboard the battleship USS Pennsylvania.
General quarters or battle stations was sounded, and the fact that it was Sunday morning, I guess, you thought nothing of it. So if battle stations sound, you go to your battle station. It was obvious that we were under attack. There was no need for radio communication. The whole harbor was under attack.
Although surprised and shocked, brave American soldiers, Marines, and sailors began to fight back. Not only the military was surprised by the attackers, even a civilian plane in the skies over Pearl Harbor got into the middle of the action. Martin Vitusic was out flying with his dad.
You could see the fires in Pearl Harbor and the ships burning and the confusion, anti-aircraft fire from the ships. The Japanese airplanes were almost all down on the ground in the initial part of the attack. They weren't up where we were. We were only 2,000 feet high, and we were all alone up there.
After the attack, there was confusion and fear that the Japanese would return for another strike. James Daniels was a pilot on one of 6 planes launched from the carrier USS Enterprise. They tried to find the Japanese task force, but their enemy was long gone. When Daniels later tried to land in Pearl Harbor, he almost became a victim of the American confusion.
We got to the entrance to the Pearl Harbor Channel, came down the channel, turned right around Hickam. We flew over the tower that you see here in the background and made our break to land, and at that moment, every gun, everybody that had a rock, every rifle, every pistol started to shoot at us. The intense anti-aircraft fire was beyond, you just couldn't understand it.
With Hawaii unprepared for such an attack, over 2,400 American souls had lost their lives. Although the American aircraft carriers were not in port and thus escaped destruction, the Japanese had crippled the battleship force of the U.S. Pacific Fleet as one of the potential threats to their own conquest of Asia. Japan continued an unbroken string of victories, and America desperately needed a quick and significant military success in order to re-establish morale and fighting spirit throughout the nation. A top-secret plan was developed to launch for the first time B-25 Army bombers from an aircraft carrier. Under the strong leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, 16 bombers would attack military targets on the Japanese home islands in April 1942. Despite the enormous risks, his co-pilot, Dick Cole, was confident in Doolittle's aeronautical abilities.
my personal feelings, I'm wondering how I was so lucky to be able to fly with Kahului. A very intriguing person, very intelligent, very quiet. He treated everybody with respect.
Young Bill Frieda served aboard the carrier USS Hornet as it transported the 16 Army bombers into enemy waters. He still recalls the day of the risky takeoff.
That day was the roughest that I ever saw any launching. You know, the flight deck kept going down, and you're standing there looking down, and the airplane's going towards the water. And then the carrier goes up, and then you look up, and you see an airplane right above you.
Once the B-25s had dropped their bombs, they could not return to the carrier. One landed safely in the Soviet Union, but the others all ran out of fuel and crashed, trying to reach friendly bases in China. Except for 7 men, 73 crew members miraculously survived.
Being young and thinking that we could do anything was part of the volunteering, and the other thing was that it's something that we had agreed to take on the responsibility of defending the country, and it was a job that we had to do.
The attack provided the greatly needed morale boost for America and showed Japan how vulnerable its homeland could be. Thanks to the American ability to break the Japanese radio code, the U.S. military had advanced notice of upcoming Japanese naval operations. During the Battle of the Coral Sea, U.S. planes sank 1 Japanese aircraft carrier in May of 1942 and 4 more during the engagement at Midway 4 weeks later, thus bringing the enemy's expansion to a halt. Japan would never recover from its carrier losses. The winds of fortune had changed in America's favor. During the following campaigns, American forces would begin to recapture Japanese-held islands and territories in the Pacific. The principles of air power and naval aviation, so effectively demonstrated by the Japanese during the attack on Pearl Harbor, now helped the Americans to fight their long way back to Japan and ultimately defeat the enemy. The storm the Japanese had ignited had come back to them with much greater force. However, no matter what type of weapon is being used, it is always the man in the machine who has to fight.
It's not a pick in the park. But, it is, the enemy was very determined, and we were too. We knew that we would never be stopped by the enemy short of the target unless they shot us down. We would go in no matter what. There was never a person that turned back because of personal fear or anything like that. Once you started, you were going to complete the mission.
Jack Podesky was a young pilot stationed in the Pacific.
Our thoughts, 19, 20-year-old kids, was it something that we had to do, not something that, well, it would be nice, or the outcome might be this or might be that. It was something we had to do, and we weren't going to stop at any ceasefires. We were going to go for full victory, unconditional surrender, and that's what we did.
These scarred old hangars stand proudly, not only as a testament to the events the world has seen since December 7th, 1941, but to the spirit of those who stepped up to answer the call and those who didn't return home.
They gave the service to the country. They dedicated their lives for a period of time, and they were willing to die. That sounds funny, doesn't it? Willing to die. No one is willing to die, but when you're in the military, you have to know that you can die if you're charging into a machine gun or something like that. But you do it because your buddy is doing it too. You're supporting him, and he's supporting you, and that's the way it works. You may be terribly afraid on your own, very, very much afraid, but you go ahead anyway. You never turn back.
As you go through these historic hangars, stop and think of the people who flew these planes. the people that willingly put their lives on the line so that we can enjoy the freedom we all have today. From December 7th, 1941 until this very day, these historic hangars stand to tell their story.
Japanese battleship.